Okay, oh, got somebody's file open there. We'll start with a new file. Okay, so the tools we're talking about today in the new V9 are going to be in the deform section. And that would be namely the create an envelope and deform using an envelope tools. And then I'm also going to show you the improvements that have been made to the wrap along curve tool. So starting with create an envelope and the deform with an envelope. These are new deforms that basically let us take an object and then deform it more freely using a mesh from 3Shaper. So we have some more integration of 3Shaper with our 3 design, a lot of parametric stuff you can go back and forth. These are deform tools, so when you work on things like NURB solids, like we're used to in the regular CAD side of the program, it takes a long time to calculate. They can break your objects. NURB solids, as you know, if you've played around with regular deforms, it's going to be the same kind of caveats there. So, use simple objects if you're going to use the deforms on them. Sweeps are usually fine, but don't try to deform a Boolean object or extrusions that have a lot of sharp points. Remember, sharp points typically are those extra corners are what makes your deforms fail. So we want to avoid those whenever possible. What it's really, really useful for is when you have really complex 3Shaper meshes and you want to do some simple deformation to them, and instead of having to move 6,000 points around, you can build an envelope and use that. I have some other great examples of where these tools are makes your job a little easier. We'll look at those as they come up. Let me get back to full screen here. Okay, and so we'll start with the create an envelope tool. So this is more of an automatic way of using envelopes. Basically, I'm just going to take a simple sphere, nice simple solid that should deform nicely. And we select the object and we click on create an envelope. Okay, so what this tool does is it's going to automatically build a mesh for us. It's going to build a mesh that encompasses our object. And we do have some controls here in the properties for the accuracy, which is basically the subdivisions. So the more subdivisions we have, the more complex of a deform we can do on this object. So you can change that with the little sliders. There's also an automatic adjustment tool that will kind of reshape your mesh to match your objects. So sometimes that'll give you some interesting meshes that you can use to transform. And there's a tolerance that you can play around with if your object is a little more detailed. I'm going to stick to a simple box mesh for now. Like I said, this automatic version of the tool, this create an envelope tool, is pretty simple. Once we validate, it's going to go ahead and ask us a question. Do you want to go ahead and deform in 3Shaper? So you want to go ahead and hit yes, and that'll pop the mesh over into 3Shaper, and we can start deforming our object with it. So this side of it's really simple, really easy to use. You do see it is a heavy calculation, even on a simple sphere. So keep that in mind. The more complex the object, the longer it'll take to calculate, more likely that your edges are going to come apart if you try to deform them. So the same kind of ideas with your normal deform tools. If it won't deform with a taper or a bend, it probably won't deform with this either, and it'll take even longer to calculate. But not a problem. We have it loaded up here, and even if you don't have 3Shaper Pro, you see I have all the tools here. Everyone who has V9 has some basic tools, and really the only tools you need for deforming your envelope are your move, rotate, and scale, which I have up here in my shortcuts, or you'll find in the move section. There are some other tools that you could use inside of here, like your layout tools and alignment tools and things like that if you have Pro, which makes things easier. But everyone can do this, even if you don't have Pro yet. So to deform this sphere, I just go ahead and modify my mesh. And we'll just kind of play around with this sphere here and change its shape by just deforming. Use a resize here and maybe scale it in towards the bottom. Okay, so you notice it doesn't update automatically my object. We have to recompute the object using the recompute button in the tree. Here's a good place where I want to point out in your customize section, you can now set your recompute button. It's in the edit category, recompute tree, to any keyboard shortcut. So we're going to use that shortcut quite a bit. So I set mine to the end key on my keyboard. It just made sense to me that when I want to recompute, I hit end. You can set that to any button you want. So I'll just hit end on my keyboard and update the shape. And like I said, you can see on this sphere, it's going to take a little time to calculate. Not too bad. Give that a second. And there we go. It's going to deform my sphere into that shape of the mesh. So great for taking, your simple objects and shaping them using 3Shaper without having to convert them to shaper objects. Let me show you another example on a sweep, which might be a little more useful for us. Go ahead and build a sweep for you. I'll start with a ring size builder in the jeweler's bench. And we'll just do a quick sweeping wizard to get a quick band going here. I'm going to go ahead and add a section using my library. Good old classic Luna will be fine for that. And sweep it up. Okay, so we'll go ahead and switch back to solids, and I'll create an envelope for my ring. Okay, so again, we can adjust it with the auto adjustment. That's going to give me a shape that kind of matches the ring, or I could just leave it boxy and adjust how many subdivisions I want on the different sides and of the box. And then once again, when it asks, do we want to go ahead and deform it, hit yes, and that'll take us right into 3Shaper to start deforming our ring. So I'll do some simple deform for you here just to kind of see how it all works. Do some resizing. Maybe I want to do a bit of a taper on this band, but I want it to be not a perfect even taper like it would be with the regular taper tool. So just hit end and update. And we have our deformed band. Okay, so that's the simplest way to use this tool is to just take your object and deform it. Now let me show you, like I said, it's really powerful if we use this on our 3Shaper meshes. So we'll go ahead and start a new file. And I'm going to jump right into 3Shaper and import a mesh that I have from previous. And that's going to be my butterfly. You've probably seen this in the intro videos for V9. So we've got a pretty complex mesh here, and I want to deform it further. And like I said, right now, if I deform it, I've got a lot of points to push and move around, and it's all manual. If I want to deform this a little more evenly, here's where a deformation envelope will be nice to use. So back in 3Design, I'll select it. Now you notice this is a group of objects. You can do multiple objects, just like in any other deform. It doesn't have to be all one solid object. And we click on my create an envelope and adjust its accuracy depending on how detailed of a deform I want to do. Okay, and then go ahead and jump into 3Shaper, and we'll start deforming. So maybe I want to bend this down a bit into more of an arc shape. Okay, so using very, very simple 3Shaper tools. Like I said, I can use my move, rotate, and scale, and it pretty much do whatever I need to this mesh. Maybe I want to bring up this part a little bit. Okay, and then I hit end whenever I want to update, and you see with the 3Shaper mesh, it's instant deformation. So like I said, it's a little more powerful on your meshes than your regular 3Design solids. So I'm getting almost a live update, instant update. Okay, so when you're done deforming, we go out of 3Shaper. Your envelope will be frozen. You can hide that so you can see your new deformed object. And there you go. If you want to go back and deform it further, you notice that I can't just double click on the deform here. What I want to do is double click on the envelope, because what we're actually modifying is that envelope that the tool created. Okay, so that's the deform using an envelope. Like I said, it's pretty much automatic. It's really simple. It makes the mesh for you. You can jump in and start editing it really quickly. It works on solids, simple solids, and meshes as well. And meshes are definitely better, just like any other deform tool. So next I want to get into what I posted as a handout as your instructions on how to do something a little more custom. So this is going to give us a mesh that's pretty much a box around the object. If we want to do something a little more custom and have a little more power over our deforms, we can set up a manual deformation. So first thing I'm going to do is create a ring in 3 shaper. I'm going to stick to a shaper object just so we can update this quickly. This will work on regular sweeps as well, of course. And I'm just going to do a simple band. And we are already in the right axis, so that's good. And we'll go ahead and select these faces and delete them. I want to do an open band. If I was doing a regular full band, I might as well just use the same method we did earlier. Alright, so I'm going to cap these off. Okay, so I've got my open shank here. Okay, so I'm going to exit out. And this is where labeling is going to help keep things in order so I know which selections I'm making. So I'm going to rename this as my object. That's going to be the object that I'm going to manipulate later. Okay, so to build my custom mesh, I'm going to go into a new model. So I'm going to access the 3 shaper module again. And I'm going to start building my custom mesh around this ring. So I'm going to start with a quad, which is a basic 2D mesh. Kind of stretch this out around my ring. Some things to keep in mind is make sure your mesh completely encompasses your object. Your object needs to be inside the mesh. Add some subdivisions here. And I'm just going to move this to one side of the ring. And then select all the faces and shell it. Simple, quick way to make a mesh around this. Oh, wait, before I shell it, I want to do one more thing. I might as well use a box. The normal way, if I'm going to do that, I want to make this, like I said, a little more custom. So I'm going to get rid of some of these faces in here, like so. That way I can bend this band in multiple directions. If it was a complete full box, I can only really taper and bend it going in one direction. I want this band to kind of twist. So we'll do something a little more custom and then shell it. And I'm just going to shell it so that it's on the other side of my band, so it's fully encompassed. And then there's one more step that's helpful, very important, is to select all the edges and sharpen them so we get a nice boxy mesh, keeping our envelope mesh as simple as possible. So we're going to exit out of 3 shaper again, and I'm going to hide and rename this mesh as my basic envelope. Okay. Now for custom envelopes to work, we actually need 2 envelopes. So the best way to get the second envelope is to just clone it. Okay, gonna go ahead and hide that, and then take my clone and convert that back into a 3 shaper mesh. So we'll validate the import and then add a edit surface to it by clicking on Reach Modeling Tools. And then to be able to work on this easier, if I go into the reflection tool, I can adjust transparency so we can kind of see my object inside the mesh. Okay, so that's all set up. We'll go ahead and exit out of 3 shaper one more time. Go ahead and rename and hide my model. This time is going to be my deform envelope. Okay. So by taking that extra time, making sure I've got my stuff labeled, that way when I set up my manual deformation envelope, I can just plug everything in by clicking on the correct titles. So we're going to click on deform using an envelope. This is the more advanced tool. And we have our object to manipulate would be the object, the basic envelope that I created first, and the deform envelope I created second. Okay. So like I said, it's a little setup, but it's definitely going to give me a lot more power and control over the type of deforms I can do with it. So if you have it all set up right, you should see this gray ghost copy of my ring. Everything looks correct. So we've got everything linked together in the tree. Now if I want to deform my object, I just double click on my deform envelope, which will take me into 3 shaper, and I start deforming. So like I said, I might want to bend this end of the band this direction. Give it a little rotation as well. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Oops, make sure I grab those points properly. And we'll do a little move the opposite direction. And a little rotation. Okay, so simple deforms here. Just hit N to update my mesh or my object. And we get that fun bending going on. So something really cool else that we can do with this version by doing a manual setup is it has an option for fixed elements like a lot of our other deform tools. So for example, you guys are used to pave not being very parametric. If your surface changes, sometimes your pave gets messed up. So the cool thing we could do is I'm gonna go ahead and pave some stones on my band here. Very sloppy, but we get the idea. And I'm going to go ahead and use my new add to history tree to add the stones automatically so I don't have to jewel them. Another great feature of V9. Okay, so now I'm going to go back into my deform setup here, and I'm going to tell it to use this jeweling as a fixed element. Why is it not letting me select it? Oh, my tree is behind. Okay, not a problem. Get rid of that one. Oops. Sorry, don't get rid of it. Just reset it up as a new deform. Looks like you can't go back and add your fixed elements, which makes sense because they would be fixed to the object. So we want to do this before we deform it. So we'll just do a new deform. There we go. So we're going to use my object, which is this one. It's already selected. My fixed element would be the jeweling. My basic element would be the basic envelope. My deformed envelope. There we go. So now we've got it set up with my stones in a fixed position. And we'll go ahead and deform my envelope further. And move this some more. Do whatever changes I want to this piece. I really bent this end of it pretty badly, didn't I? It's all right. All right. Yeah, I really messed that up. Let me let me go back here. Undo. Okay, let me get back to, okay, so I got my original object, I've got my deform, my basic envelope. Let me add my pave now. So lesson learned, set this all up the first time before you deform it so you don't run into that problem. Okay, then add my stones. All right, let's try this again. Set up my solid, set up my fixed elements, my basic envelope, my deformed envelope. Okay, here's what I'm gonna have to do is redo my deformed envelope because I've already changed it. So we'll just clone and convert this back to my deform. Okay, sorry about all that. A little confusion. Like I said, it's not the easiest tool. We have to do a lot of step by step, a little extra setup. But once we get it set up properly, we should be good to go. Fixed element. my basic envelope, my deform envelope, and validate. Now we should be able to deform this sucker. Oops, make sure I'm in point mode. There we go, yay. Okay, so I've set it up properly. You see that my pave is linked to that surface, and we told it not to deform the jewels, so I can move my surfaces around, deforming the surfaces, and my jewels stay round, they stay in those positions. So really cool trick to be able to do some parametric even on a paved object. So you can use fixed elements for a lot of different things, but just one example. Really cool trick. Okay, go back and see there's my updated piece. And we're good to go. Okay, so I have one more example of a custom envelope for you. And another example of where this is a great tool is on imported objects that you download from the web. So you may have experimented with downloading different OBJs from different sites like Turbo Squid and can't even think of names now. Any of those free sites that you can download models from. But most of those models weren't designed for jewelry. They were designed for video games. So the mesh is not going to be the cleanest mesh. It may have to be fixed, things like that. So here's an example where I found this great little gecko lizard that I wanted to use in my design. But when I import it in, we see that first of all, it's way out in space. I'm going to have to fix that first. Again, different programs use different axis systems. So what I'll do is I'll just use position to center my model, and we'll see that the scale of this model is way off as well. So let me scale this up. Okay, might do some rotation and fix all that too. So that's one problem you'll have when you import your object, is it may be in a different scale and in a different layout than what you're used to, so we'll have to fix that first. But then when I take this into 3Shaper, we'll notice that this mesh is a triangulated mesh. It could be really difficult to modify at this point. Sometimes they'll come in with thousands of polygons and it might be difficult to modify. So here's another example of where having a custom mesh would be great to be able to deform this little gecko. So I have one set up already. Under webinar gecko with the custom rig. All right, there's my little guy. And we see I've already set up my basic and deform envelope. Let you take a look at the deform envelope. You see it's a lot more custom. That way I can bend things like the feet and the tail independently. I would be able to do that with just a boxy mesh. So go in here and see how I bent it up. So that way I can move the feet into different positions. I was able to bend the tail. So it did take a little time, and definitely having 3Shaper Pro to build this mesh, it's a little difficult to build if you just have the basic tools. So again, another advantage there. So if I want to stretch out his tail, bend it a little more, we can just update it, change it. So now we can do some deforming and modeling on this complex imported mesh as well. Okay. All right, and then that's going to bring us to, so that's pretty much it for the deform envelopes. Like I said, I have the handout. It shows you those step by step, so you don't do like I did and get everything out of order. You can go through and set up your custom envelopes following those steps. That handout will be available to download as well on the Training Lounge. So the next thing I wanted to show you is the improvements to the wrap along curve tool, which is here. It's an old tool, but it's got some better options into it. So we're going to start with my gecko as well. And let's say I want to wrap this to a ring by just drawing a curve and wrapping this gecko around the ring. So the first thing I want to do is build my ring, of course. Let me figure out what I'm doing here. Okay, so there's my basic ring. I'm going to sweep it. Using a profile. And I'll just use good old Luna again. And I'm going to create a single surface so that I can do a UV extract. Actually, let's just project a curve on here. I just want to bend it to the top of the ring. So I'll just do a line across the middle. Okay, make sure that's flat. And then I'll just project that down onto the surface using curve projection. All right. Okay, so if I want to bend my object to this curve, we use wrap along curve. And the old way the tool worked was it just basically did this. It's going to stretch your object to the entire curve. So we get a lot of distortion in our object. So what they've added is some more improved alignment and rotation options, but they've also added limited to object size. So that's going to wrap it but keep my object the same size as it was and not matching the end of the curve. Okay, the other thing that we've added is whether we want it to sit on one end of the curve or the other, or we can put it right in the middle of the curve so we can keep it centered. Okay. Now I could have moved this object off of the plane to begin with, but now that I've got it wrapped, I'll just do a little bit of manual adjustment here to get it to sit on my ring. So, but we get the idea is, like I said, just a simple, really little improvement, but being able to wrap an object to a curve and not having to worry about the length of that curve. We don't have to worry about the object stretching out from end to end of the curve. We can keep the object the original size, but still warp it to those curves. All right. So that's really it. This is a short webinar today. Kind of figured it would be. If you have questions, now would be the time to do so.